2014 was when I achieved the muscle up, and then on and off worked on calisthenics. And growing up with Street Fighter being a real love of mine, I had no idea a human could do that in real life. And my wife said, "What about Calitrix? It combines calisthenics and tricks." And I didn't need any other suggestions. I was like, that is so cool. That's so perfect. Let's call it Calitrix. I don't see the point in aiming small. Shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon, and that's pretty decent too, you know. So and I really just still love doing it, because even though I can only do basic stuff, it just makes you feel, and any tricker will agree, I think it just makes you feel superhuman. You feel like a superhero or an action movie star when you're up in the air spinning around multiple times throwing kicks.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Motivation Podcast, a special behind the scenes trial series where I am interviewing interesting and inspiring people to learn more about how they overcome barriers, limiting beliefs, and challenges through health and fitness. This is season 0, a sneak peek into what's to come as I experiment, learn, and have deep discussions with artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, and creative people in hopes of engaging interest in an official podcast in the future. I'm your host, Cameron Neal, and my guest today is a man with many hats and full of dedication. He is a polyathlete, immersing himself over the years in martial arts, tricking, calisthenics, competitive arm wrestling, and full contact medieval fighter. On top of this, he's a music producer, security specialist, a business owner, and content creator of the brand Calitrix, and he's also a father of 6. It is my immense pleasure to welcome my friend, Shannon Michaels, to the podcast.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, Shannon, I had no idea you were so involved in all these different projects over the years, and so thank you for fitting your time and jumping on today on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think it's pretty common when I know somebody, but I haven't known them for a long time, and I tell them like maybe 2 or 3 more things than like the facet that they met me in, and they're like, "Oh wow, I just kind of knew this about you, but there's also this and this and this." And then I'm like, "Yeah," and I could probably write a book about the rest. So yeah.
I mean, that's it. Like, I've got so many questions for you, but I'll try and, keep it into the podcast length. But I think like the first question I like to start with, especially for me, because it's a brand new sort of term I'm hearing, is like, what is a polyathlete, and what does that look like for you?
So I'd never really heard that term before, but as soon as I heard it, I thought that perfectly sums up like what I am. And it was actually, I don't know if you've ever seen Juji Mufu. He was the first person that I heard use the term. And to be honest, probably the only other person, but I'm sure there's a lot of us out there. So a polyathlete is just somebody who takes on multiple disciplines and tries not to spread themselves too thinly across a bunch of them. So yeah, there was a point where I was arm wrestling and dabbling in calisthenics and also doing tricking and training in the gym. So at the time, I was specifically competing in arm wrestling, but I was still spending almost as much time on these other endeavors. So over time, I have learned to kind of cut that back because it's great being a jack of all trades. It's lots of fun and you learn lots of interesting, really good things, but you don't get really good at any one particular thing when you are dividing your time and energy like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So term that I've kind of associated myself as a bit more of a hybrid athlete, which is becoming a much more popular term these days. But the polyathlete, that's quite an interesting one. I like it.
They're probably the same thing. It's just a different word for the same thing. Yeah, I actually really like the sound of hybrid athlete. I've not heard that one before, but yeah, that suits too.
Yeah. But your journey at the moment is focusing a lot on calisthenics. What is calisthenics, and how is this different from normal gym training?
Okay, so calisthenics, like at its roots and core, the most basic simplified version, it's exercises using only the body weight. Okay. But the calisthenics that I'm into and that I pursue, it's more, even though I'm not competing, it is a competitive sport where you're kind of pushing the body more to its limits. And I would compare it to an extreme version of men's artistic gymnastics. So it's incorporating skills like the planche, levers, Maltese, Victorian, Iron Cross, Hefesto, and advanced variations of the muscle up. At its basic level, it's push-ups, chin-ups, dips, burpees. So people will often use calisthenics as an alternative to weights to get fit. And then I think through that journey, they see somebody doing a muscle up and go, that looks really cool. I want to learn that. And especially for myself, and I've heard a lot of other people say the same thing, the muscle up is like the gateway drug to start pursuing the more elite level skills. Yeah.
Yeah. When I started my fitness journey, I was in my parents' garage, and calisthenics was sort of just my gateway to fitness in general. I think it really set me up with a good foundation for success, learning how to do push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, basically all of those, those basic body weight movements. And that way, when I transitioned to weights, like I had a really good, strong foundation. And I kind of hope that more people get into that, early on. They can incorporate that with exercise at the gym, but to be able to master those bodyweight movements is, I think, really important for just longevity and overall strength.
Yeah, it definitely builds the body in a different way, in the sense that, like, lifting weights, you're really isolating on one muscle, and so that one muscle is going to get really aesthetic and jacked and more full. But then when you go to try to test your body's limits, you realize that, oh, like my bicep's strong, but the connective tissue here isn't what I need it to be to execute this skill, or the tricep isn't as developed because I didn't spend enough specific time on the tricep with weights. Whereas when you're doing calisthenics, it's hitting almost everything. Like when I was working on planche, people would say, oh, what muscles are you activating? And I would say, like, everything except for the back of my ear. Like, there isn't a muscle in the body that's not being engaged in a lot of these positions. And so you get that overall development, and it increases your stability through everything else that you then execute. Like, I feel like my deadlift, my strength in my back is just stupid. So my deadlift form isn't what it would be for a power lifter, or even like I think, is it Olympic weightlifting you do, or is it just called weightlifting?
Yeah.
So my technique probably wouldn't be as good, but like I can pull so much weight compared to what I should be able to, I think, because my back development is ridiculous from calisthenics. So yeah, it's a lot of that connective tissue is getting really heavily developed in a way that weights won't specifically do, without probably like 3 hours at the gym every day instead of an hour at the gym, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen you pull your deadlift. It's like 230 or something like that that you did at the gym one time.
I achieved 230 before I stopped focusing on it, because I was actually getting too heavy and it was starting to be detrimental to my calisthenic skills. So yeah, I haven't deadlifted since I hit 230, and that was at 76 kilos body weight, I believe.
That's huge.
Yeah,
Far out. That's
I was
amazing.
happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it? And was this how you sort of started training?
So I've been using bodyweight exercises since I was very young as part of my fitness routine, because I was a martial artist from a very young age. But pursuing calisthenics in the form that I pursue it now, chasing skills, I think I got into it around 2014. It's a long, convoluted story, to be honest. But I think about 2014 was when I achieved the muscle up, and then on and off worked on calisthenics. I got sidetracked bodybuilding. I got sidetracked arm wrestling. And in 2019, I kind of like retired from competing in arm wrestling and just threw myself into calisthenics. So I can comfortably say that it's been 5 consecutive years of just really knuckling down on the calisthenics, but it's been part of my life for maybe a decade leading up to that. Yeah.
Yep. And have you always been into fitness? Is that just like who you are?
Yeah, I have, but I don't think I realized till like past the second half. I think I was in my 30s before I really realized that I'm an athletic person, even though it was always a facet of my life. I didn't consider myself an athlete. So through my teen years, I mean, I started martial arts when I was 9. And then through my teen years, I was riding BMX as well, doing tricks and riding mountain bikes on trails, rollerblading. So I was always doing active stuff, but they were always like solo pursuits. I never really was into team sports. And because of that, you generally hear when they're talking about athletes, or I felt through my younger years that people were talking about soccer players, tennis players, footy players. And so I didn't really consider myself an athlete, even though I was super athletic. And I've come to the realization that, like, yeah, a big part of my personality is that I'm an athlete, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I had pretty much the similar experience with the term athlete. It was always with team sports, maybe like tennis as your solo sport, but like I wish I had been exposed to more opportunities, when I was younger, to I guess be an athlete, even though I was pretty athletic as a young child. But your journey through like martial arts, that's now becoming into tricking. What is that? Because I think this is such a very unique sort of facet of your life, which is really cool. Like I've seen your videos, which is like amazing. But yeah, love to hear like, what is tricking, and how does that fit into your life now in your training?
Okay, so tricking is a freestyle form of movement that's based off various martial arts combined together, and also combining elements of gymnastics, tumbling, and breakdancing. But it's evolved over time into like its own thing, so much so that there would be athletes in the sport that if you watched them, it would be hard to even do a comparison directly to what I just explained. You'd probably say, "Oh, that guy a breakdancer? Is that guy a gymnastics tumbler? Oh, this guy looks like a martial arts stuntman." Because it's such a freestyle form, you can really pursue it down the sort of avenue of whatever interests you. So for myself, I really love the martial arts aspect of it, having a background in martial arts and a deep rooted love for like old martial arts movies. I love seeing the double and triple spins in the air with multiple kicks coming out. But there's a lot of guys now in the younger generation of tricking that just focus on like multiple twists through the air and crazy multiple flips that turn into twists midair, and they don't really care about the kicking element or the clean martial arts form that actually was a really fundamental part of tricking when it began. So it began on the competitive martial arts circuit in the United States, I believe, but I couldn't tell you accurately what year. You'd have to look it up. I think around the early 2000s. So people would compete in, I'm sure we've all heard of like katas, where you're just doing forms, and then just to put a bit of flair on their form, someone started throwing a tornado kick, which is the most basic jumping 360 roundhouse, and someone else must have seen that and went, "Oh, that's really cool, he got bonus points and got the judges attention doing that, I'm going to do a backflip as well." And so it just evolved from there. These guys were just trying to outdo each other with that one or two little trick that they were throwing into their performance sets. And then through that, over time, it became its own niche sport that then had nothing to do with the competitive martial arts circuit. When I got into it, and sorry, I'm straying a little bit from the original question of what is tricking, but just to expand on it, it was about 2008 when I discovered tricking online, and there was this whole community of guys that I would say probably 70% of them came from that competitive circuit. And then the other 30% were just guys that saw it on the internet like me and were like, "That's so cool, I'm going to go out in my backyard and learn to do a flash kick." So yeah, it just grabbed me from the get-go. I'm 41 years old now, and it's really hard to learn new tricks. I'm not light, I'm not young. It's scary hitting the ground from 2 meters up in the air, and you don't recover as quick from injuries. So I'm by no means a high level tricker, but I can teach it pretty competently, and hence that's become a part of what Calitrix is, teaching calisthenics and tricking. And I really just still love doing it, because even though I can only do basic stuff, it just makes you feel, and any tricker will agree, I think it just makes you feel superhuman. You feel like a superhero or an action movie star when you're up in the air, spinning around multiple times, throwing kicks for absolutely no reason other than that it's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Do you find, like you mentioned now, that it's much harder to learn new tricks, but in terms of doing the movements, do you find that, like, once you sort of warmed up, you can do it pretty well, or do you find that some days it's quite rough on the body mobility wise,
I think
anything
that
like
if
that?
I focused, so it comes back to that whole thing of being a polyathlete. If it were just my one sport, I'd probably find everything really easy to execute all the time. But at the moment, I try to fit in a tricking session on Saturdays when the weather's good. And so, like, that's a pretty small window of opportunity. So sometimes I might trick for 3 or 4 weeks in a row on that Saturday, and then other times I don't get to for a month because of the weather or whatever other factors. Um, Generally, when I focus on 2 or 3 skills to clean them up, the last few skills that I achieved start to lapse a bit. And then I go through this period of frustration where like, for example, B twist, a butterfly twist was my go-to move. I could throw it with like no effort, no thought. And I just loved it because it was one of my favorite original moves to learn. And then I took a few months off focusing on arm wrestling training, went back, couldn't B twist, forgot about it for a while, came back to tricking, could do everything else, and just couldn't B twist. And so I spent a few months getting it back, and it's dreadful now. It is not a go-to for me. I'm really not happy with how it looks. But the moves that I worked on when I came back are all pretty consistent. So the short answer is no, it's not always easy for me. But something always is. So I might go out and say, like today, I'm going to work on B twists and cheat 720s. And my body might just go, "No, you're not, dude. You're 41 and you're sore and stiff and your hips aren't moving." But my backflips are on fire. So I'll just backflip for 20 minutes. Like yeah, it is what it is. I'll let my body decide what it wants to do, because otherwise I just stress myself out and get really disappointed and frustrated. And who wants that?
Yeah. Have you ever tried parkour?
Yeah, so I'm actually really glad you asked that, because we never even discussed this, but this is actually what got me down the path of discovering tricking. So I was training for military entry around 2007, 2008, and I was researching online fitness stuff just to get my fitness up before the tests. And I started seeing, just like in the sidebar on YouTube, this is in the early days of YouTube, like dudes jumping off rooftops, I guess because it must have been somehow relevant to military training that I was looking at. And so I was like, oh, what is this? There's a bunch of young guys in England jumping along the rooftops. And I started watching more and more of that. And I was like, oh, that looks super fun. I'm going to learn to do this. Back then I was watching these brothers called the Armitage brothers. They ended up becoming super successful in parkour. They were in Pepsi ads, all sorts. They drive supercars now based off this thing they used to do for fun with each other and with their mates at nighttime, running around, just mucking around on the streets. So it was parkour at the start around 2007. And then I heard of free running and I was like, what's that? And I looked it up and people were saying, oh, free running is just parkour with tricks. And I'm like, what do you mean tricks? What are tricks? So I looked that up, and the first trick that I saw was Juji Mufu doing a flash kick. For anyone that doesn't know, a flash kick was Guile's special move in Street Fighter. It's a backflip with a kick in it. And growing up with Street Fighter being a real love of mine, I had no idea a human could do that in real life. And I just watched that over and over and over. And I was just so drawn into the fact that a human could do this for real. And this guy was just like super entertaining to watch in his young years. He was hilarious. I highly recommend go and look for Juji Mufu's old tricking tutorials. They're very entertaining. I found them. So anyway, and so my attention went straight from parkour and free running to tricking. And I just like stopped free running altogether and threw myself into tricking and gave myself all sorts of injuries in my backyard trying to learn a backflip before I actually learned it in a controlled, safe environment with an instructor. But yeah, so yes, I was into parkour, and that was the beginning of a whole journey down another trail.
Yeah, wow. Okay, what's the worst injury you've had?
So the worst injury happened end of 2009. I think it was December, at the Australian Tricks gathering in Sydney, where I went for 5 days. I believe it went 4 or 5 days, and trickers came from all around the world, and we slept in a gymnastics facility. It was my first like gathering. So gatherings are a big thing in the tricking scene. I haven't been to one since. I felt back then I was 27 or 28 and I felt old around all these guys. So now I would feel super. I feel like if I was going to go to a tricking gathering, it would be a bunch of retired veteran parents trying to still land a tornado kick. So I just learned to 540 and I didn't understand the idea of conditioning your body for extreme sports before you actually start undertaking the harder things. And I think that my body was fine to do backflips and spinning heel kicks, and cheat 720s are a gentle spinning aerial kick. But the 540 is a 360-degree rotation in the air and a kick that comes down just on the foot that kicks with, and the rest of your body's, everything else is off the ground. So all that pressure is driving through your leg and through that knee, and you need to posture up afterwards. And I didn't understand this principle of posturing up. So I was landing hunched over and my whole weight was just crushing down on my knee and crushing down on my knee. And I just went into it with way too much zest. And for like 48 hours, just went 540 kick, 540 kick, 540 kick, 540 kick. And my knee went pop, pop, pop. And I dropped to the ground in agony. I think within a few hours, my knee was like this. I ended up tearing my MCL, PCL, and my meniscus pretty badly. Had to leave on the third day of the gathering, unfortunately. And yeah, so that was definitely my worst injury.
Wow, that's insane. How have you dealt with injuries, and have you do you have like a similar process when you have little things come up here and every now and again?
Yep. So that injury was the first. Not only was it my worst injury, but it was like really my first proper injury. And I guess I'm lucky I made it to 27 before I sustained my worst injury. And it taught me a lot about the healing process. I saw doctors and specialists, and they said it's definitely going to require surgery, and it's that bad that you probably won't do anything athletic again. So just heal up and find some new hobbies. And I was way too hyperactive for that. And I just in total denial, I wouldn't accept that. So I didn't get surgery. I sat on the end of my bed and started doing gentle leg raises in pain and in tears until I wasn't in as much pain and there were no tears. And then I added an ankle weight and I kept doing the same thing. So I was like lying on my back. I actually saw a movie years later. What was it called? With Scott Adkins. I don't know if you're a fan of Scott Adkins. The name of the movie will come to me later, but he basically went through the same thing, only he was in prison and he used a mop bucket, I think, as an ankle weight. So anyway, sitting on the end of my bed doing leg raises, and just slowly, gently working the leg with ankle weights until it built up a bit more like integrity. And then I went to the gym and started doing heavier work to rebuild it. And so over time, I built it up. And I think after about 12 months, I then came back to what I was doing and felt stronger than I even was beforehand. So it was like a 12-month break from tricking or from doing like the stuff I was working on anyway. I was still doing really fundamental basic stuff slowly and gently. But after that period of like really focused work in the gym, it got a lot stronger. So later during my arm wrestling career, I think end of 2018, I ended up tearing tendons in my elbow and kind of just used a similar process to heal that. I didn't want to look at surgery because I didn't feel like the injury warranted it. But just a lot of really light, slow reps. You start out like with no weight, just going through the motions as if you are doing a weighted exercise, and then just slowly add more and more weight. I'm not a medical professional. I don't recommend that other people go and do this, but for me, it worked. And so it's just a slow process. Maybe surgery is quicker for other people. I don't like the idea of my body being cut open and tampered with unless it was really dire. And so I've just dealt with it myself in my own ways. Yeah. And I'm still going.
Yeah. Wow, that's truly inspiring. And do you find that you still feel anything in the injured knee?
Not anymore, but I did for years on cold days. I would know in advance when it was going to be really cold and rainy because my knee would just start playing up. It wasn't even that it hurt. It would just like wobble. And I would find that I could still do things like flips and spinning kicks, no problem. But then I'd go to step on a bus and my knee would just buckle out from under me. So even though it like maintained a lot of integrity under stress, regular things like walking and going upstairs, sometimes it would just give out. But now, as I mentioned, I'm 41. I don't think I've experienced any of that for a few years. I don't recall having any like just, oh, there goes my knee sort of thing for at least the last 4 or 5 years at least. Yeah.
So yeah, I've had a lot of clients where in their youth they've injured themselves. Doesn't have to even be from a sport per se, but they've had an injury to their knees or their back, and that has put them out for a long time. And their natural instinct or what they've been told by a GP is to have bed rest. And while that does, reduce the pain in your short term, but if you don't work on it in the long term, that's going to cause you grief potentially for the rest of your life if you don't work on it at all. And Definitely. I've been very fortunate as well. I haven't really had any bad injuries that hasn't taken me out. The worst injury I've had was to my lower back, and this was a year into my weightlifting journey. And at the time, well, it was like just a little tweak. And I was like, oh, okay, kind of really feeling it. I was trying to go for a max deadlift, and unfortunately, didn't get there. But that was fine. I was just taking it carefully for the next week. And then a week later, I was doing some slow tempo back squats. And then the last one, my back just had enough and just felt like that in my back. And then huge pain down sort of my right side. Very fortunately though, I had to, I worked on it every single day. I was doing stretches to begin with, basic stretches, and I couldn't even get my hands past my toes if I was trying to bend down. But just every day I was doing that, but also still in the gym. So I was doing upper body machine work, and then it progressed doing, okay, can we do some standing exercises, some unilateral work? And then eventually 4 weeks later, I was back snatching under a bar. And then 6 weeks later doing squats. And then 8 weeks, I was almost sort of back to where I was in terms of lifting weights. So there's always something you can do. And obviously this is going to be injury dependent, but in most cases you can still do something, but it just might be a bit of a slower process.
Yeah. And I definitely think that doing something is better than nothing. I think that bed rest period is probably crucial for like 2 to 4 weeks, but beyond that, you're doing yourself detriment to just, oh, I've just got to rest. I'll be good in 6 months or I'll be good in a year. You won't in 6 months or a year, you'll be weak. So
yeah,
yeah, like maybe the joint will work properly again, but what physical state are you going to be in, and how long is it going to take for you to return to even close to where you were at before that injury? So I don't think that doctors always have the same long term sight as athletes might have. And I think if more doctors were athletes, they'd probably give different advice and say rest it for 2 to 4 weeks or something, but definitely do something. Don't let this just be the end of what you love, you know?
Yep. Yeah, that's it. Competitive arm wrestling. Well, I'm very curious to hear more about that. How did you get into it, and how competitive is it?
Yeah, okay. So how I got into it, I think how I got into every like niche sport, every sport that I've had is so niche or had an interest in rather, and I discovered all of them through YouTube. I'm like a big advocate for YouTube.
I love
And
it
I
too.
would say, you know, because like television, I haven't watched television since about 2013, like free to air TV, but they just don't promote these smaller sports, and so you won't see them unless you go and look for them. Again, it was just around the time when I got into arm wrestling, I was focused on bodybuilding, and this was around 2014. And I wanted to eventually get into the competitive circuit. And I was at that point of my development where I was considering, do I take performance enhancing drugs to actually get competitive or just keep pushing as I am? And just in the sidebar again, I started seeing recommendations of clips of this crazy guy called the Stop Sign, who would, every time he arm wrestled someone, he was just like screaming like a maniac. And I just found it like hilarious and super entertaining to watch. So I was like binge watching just this one guy. Then I started noticing that in the background of some of the clips, there were sponsors. And I was like, is this a sport? I thought it was just this guy being funny with his mates. Turns out it was a sport. So I looked it up, and there was a club in North Rocks in Sydney. And so I headed up there and started training with them. They were the state team, and they were the only team in New South Wales at the time. I think this was early 2016. After about 9 months of traveling every Wednesday night and getting home at 1 or 2 in the morning, I was getting tired of the traveling, sorry. And so I just started a local team. It ended up being me and one other guy for a while, then evolved into 3 of us. Currently, the club, which is super unofficial as a club now because I'm not running it anymore, probably has at least 10 people, but it's grown reasonably well. I think if everybody in Illawarra that actually at some point has shown up, there might be 15 or 20 of them, but actively there's somewhere between 5 to 10 guys locally doing it. The Sydney team has grown massively, and now there's also smaller teams all around New South Wales. So the sport has really taken off since 2016. I think at that time it had existed for about 6 years, but it was like slow growth. And I reckon after about 2019, 2020, it really accelerated. Maybe that was because something to do with more online promotions by more competitions. There is a World Arm Wrestling Federation. So when you rank really highly in a local comp, you can then go to nationals, and anyone can compete at nationals. Sorry, when you perform in the top 3 at nationals for Australia, you qualify to go to worlds and actually represent Australia on the world's platform. There's no money in that. It's like the Olympics of arm wrestling. So it has its own standards and rules, and you get a medal and you get ranked in the world standings. Then there's a bunch of other leagues that are like privately owned and funded that are probably way more entertaining to watch because they streamline the rule set to make it better for camera. And they do what's called super matches, where it's 5 or 6 rounds instead of just one, boom, you lost, get off the stage. So when it's a super match, it's more like a 30-40 minute event of just one match. And there's a lot more like build up and smack talk, and it's just a bit more entertaining. And there's a lot more money in those leagues, and a lot of them don't drug test. So the guys are like jacked, unfortunately. And a lot of you won't agree with me out there that are into arm wrestling. The fact that they're on the PEDs makes a huge division between like the World Competitive League and then these private leagues. So if you really want to make it big and get a name for yourself, you really don't have much choice but to get on PEDs. So yeah, you can quote and take that to the bank because that would cause a lot of uproar that I said that, I think. But I don't think that there's like a superstar arm wrestler in the world that isn't on something, and copious amounts of it.
Yeah. You mentioned just before that you were at a point where you could have chosen to go PEDs or not.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about that.
So I think like it's pretty apparent in bodybuilding. You can compete in physique, and you can get like a bit bigger than what I am now. Like I'm 80 kilos, and I'm by no means am comparing myself to a competitive bodybuilder, but I am probably close to the limit of what I could achieve naturally physique wise. Close to. I've been a lot more full than this. You hit that point where you're like, okay, I can maybe put on another 6 kilos of muscle, but how shredded am I going to look? If I take this substance, I'm going to look like that guy that I see that inspired me to get into this, that is on the Mr. Olympia circuit. You know what I mean? And, everybody in Mr. Olympia, again, they're on copious amounts of stuff. I don't understand how the testing works because it's not legal. Kai Green was banned a few years back, probably quite a few years back now because I'm so out of touch with the circuit, because he got done. But I reckon there was a whole bunch of politics building up to why they even tested him and didn't test everyone else at that time. So I was pursuing bodybuilding and had seen this specific physique. I think the guy's name was Lazar Angelov, and I really like how he looked. And I was like, I'll be happy to just get to that guy's level. He was probably at the bottom level of where you would start to go, okay, maybe now if I develop from here, I can go to Mr. Olympia. He looked like a fitness model, but didn't look like he was on the stage of Mr. Olympia. And that was the sort of look that I aspired to, just being pretty full and muscular and shredded for the sake of looking good, and then maybe getting on stage once every year or two. I got so distracted by arm wrestling that I just put bodybuilding completely out of my mind. I never wanted to be an arm wrestler that was winning because I was spending $400 to $1,000 a month or whatever it is on substances. I also don't like needles. I saw Rich Piana die. There's so many reasons to not take PEDs. I didn't want to shorten my lifespan for my kids' sake, for my own sake. I didn't want to mess with my sexual organs. I didn't want to have emotional outbursts. In my younger years, I already had probably anger management issues without testosterone and estrogen fluctuations being all over the place. So there was a whole bunch of, I guess, sensible and logical reasons why I didn't go down that path, and I still wouldn't. I don't regret not taking PEDs. Yeah. But I also don't judge others. Like the guys at the top of the Mr. Olympia circuit, their physiques are next level. They're like Space Marines. It's amazing what they achieve with that. And that's their life choice. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely becoming more popular and more mainstream. Not necessarily to people to take it, but people to talk about it. And I think this has pros and cons to it. People who've been more open about their use just shows a bit more transparency of what a natural physique looks like and the capacity versus what can be done on enhanced. And people, it's more demystified on the consequences of what it is. But at the same time, if more people can see what it actually is, then they might be more inclined to try it because there's less mystery behind it.
Yeah. I do think with the younger crowds at the gyms that a lot of guys jump on it way too soon because they just want to be buff. And for whatever, I think that I would say 80-90% of them, they don't even want to compete. They just want to look really jacked. And so they go to the gym for a few months and start asking their mates, where can I get some gear from? And it is just not the way. If you're going to do it, you need to be at totally plateaued. You've been training for 4 to 10 years sort of plateau. I'm not getting anywhere now. Now I want to consider this, do some research, speak to medical professionals, speak to a bunch of guys that have been on it for years, learn all about it, and then see if you can justify it, then see if you can also afford it, and if you are willing to take on all of the negative side effects potentially. But it's just not the case. And so you end up with these 19 and 20-year-old guys with the acne covered backs and they're super jacked for 6 months to a year. Then they lose it and they bloat and they get depressed. And they always look back on that point where, I remember when I was like this, I wish I could do this again. But for whatever reason, they're not going to do another cycle, bro. And they're never going to look like that again. And it ends up being a real sore point. I have seen that happen a lot.
Yeah. Putting that aside now, because I could keep going on your whole fitness journey.
I'm sure we could, yeah.
Yeah. But you're also a security specialist and a music producer. These are completely different realms compared to your fitness side.
So different. So different.
Yeah. How did you get into these areas?
So music production, I was probably 13 or 14 and just fell in love with hip hop. As soon as I heard hip hop music, it was still in its fledgling state coming into Australia at that point. It wasn't a huge thing when I was 14. That was in 1994 or so. Also around the peak year of hip hop, I believe 94 to 96 was when or what us older heads consider the classic era of hip hop albums coming out. And so by the time I was 16, I was rapping at home and I was like downloading small little waveform beats and looping them and rapping over them with my friends and recording onto cassette. And it just like really evolved into like a passion of mine. So I bought my first drum machine. My best mate helped me buy my first keyboard because he earned double the income that I was getting when we were 18. And I just started making beats at home and just like threw myself into that. And I've been doing it ever since. So behind me, there's a bunch of instruments, drum machines, samplers, a few little synths. I don't classically play any instruments, but I can handle a sampler and drum machine pretty well. And then I do a lot of production in the box, like in a computer. So yeah, that's just been something that I've forever loved and will forever do. My retirement plan is to one day move into the middle of nowhere and just have a small recording studio and just chill out and make beats and switch off to the world. So, but that's probably 30 or 40 years away. I did aspire to running a recording studio professionally and being a professional sound engineer and producer for many years, but just let too many things get in the way and it just became a hobby. So again, no real regrets. I love making music, but it's not like the focus of 100% of my time anymore. Security, I started 20 years ago working in the security industry, and it was just that it was a job recommended to me by a couple of people that I knew that were doing it. And they said, oh, you'd probably do all right at this. Go and get your license and I'll get you some work. So I got my security license and started working as a bouncer the same day the license came through. And I worked as a bouncer for nearly 15 years, but as well as that was working retail security, driving a security patrol. And so every facet of security basically that's out there besides carrying a gun and doing armed escorting. And then just over time, being in it for a long time, you could become a supervisor. I did some managerial work. I've worked at Australia's only nuclear facility. That was cool. And I've recently got accredited as a security consultant. And I've also been studying cybersecurity on the side. And so, yeah, my current role is as a security advisor in a cyber facility that I can't really say too much more about. So I kind of work in defense security at the moment, but I'm looking to become a private consultant in the future.
Yeah. Wow. So many different facets. And I love it that you're out there just trying different things and being so involved in pretty much in what life has to offer, just going and following what you like, what your passions are, and just going for it. But like on top of this, you're also a father of 6. Like, firstly, congratulations. But secondly, how the hell do you manage to balance all this, your family life, your work, and your fitness?
How do I manage it? Probably poorly. My wife helps a lot. She's always telling me, write out a schedule. You're going to write out a schedule for this weekend. I just juggle things as best I can. So I've got it to this point where I've nominated specific days to things. Like I mentioned, I try to get out and go tricking on Saturday if the weather's good. But generally, so now Saturdays are also dedicated. At the moment, I'm producing a 5-part series on how to start calisthenics, just as an example for YouTube. So my Saturdays involve shooting in the morning and then editing in the afternoon and finishing that off and getting that online. So I spend nearly my whole Saturday and I squeeze in tricking or gym somewhere in that day. Sunday is just family time. So I switch off to everything else and I refuse to take on anything else and just hang out with the family. And then after work every day as well, obviously it's family time. So, but all my training and stuff is still a very high priority for me. So if I haven't been to the gym through the day, I might get home and run off to the gym for a bit, but I make sure that I spend the whole time when I'm at home being engaged with the family. 6 kids came about because I was a single father of 2 daughters for quite some time. Then I met the woman who is now my wife and she had 3 sons. And so we came together and we're nearly a Brady bunch, 3 boys and 2 girls. And 4 months ago, we had our own little girl. So we are now officially a Brady bunch with 3 girls and 3 boys. And they are between the ages of 4 months and 21 years old. So definitely keeps me busy.
Wow. Congratulations on your latest newborn. That's amazing.
She's amazing. Yeah. It's a different experience being a parent all over again at 41 too. Yeah.
How have you managed to, energy wise, and to be able to balance all that? Because I can imagine sometimes where you're feeling unmotivated or unfocused, distracted, different priorities come up. Do you experience any sort of those negative feelings when things get really tough?
I definitely did. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to cope better and like just to manage my energy levels, my emotions, everything better. You just get better at coping when you focus on getting better at coping. I'm big on self-development, and I've really just like constantly tried to be a better version of myself in every facet of my life. So whether that's focusing on, what should I be eating to keep my energy levels high and all my mineral and vitamin intake up there, and then also using supplementation sometimes on the side. At the moment, I'm not really taking much. I think I take magnesium tribulus, which is meant to be a natural test booster, but I never got my levels checked before I started taking it. So I don't know if it does anything, but the placebo is keeping me energetic. I don't feel that my test levels were low anyway. I just thought, oh, that's going to perk me up a bit. I'll give it a crack. I've taken things like glucosamine because it was meant to like help your joints recover and grow stronger. And I did it on and off for years and felt like it didn't make a difference. I was taking vitamin C for a while to make sure that my iron absorption was going through properly. Then I found out that apparently vitamin C tablets can contribute to men getting gallstones, I think. So I stopped doing that, and I've felt like no change in like anything. So I think that a lot of supplementation is probably unnecessary, but it's good to experiment and see if you're not getting enough of something from your diet, then go and get it in a pill if you can. Like there's nothing wrong with that if it's natural, but do the research and find out if long-term it's not going to be good for you. And just experiment a lot. So at the moment, I take protein on the days where I train. Otherwise, I just eat really healthy. I don't like eat Maccas. Probably have pizza once a week, which is like the worst thing. And I have chocolate nearly every night that I should probably stop. But like, it's the little luxuries in life that keep you sane, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But generally, my diet's pretty healthy. Yeah. And I think that contributes a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And your how you stay focused with what's important. How do you figure out what's actually worth your time?
What is making me happy and keeping me happy and sane? So I wouldn't focus on anything that I don't have a desire to pursue that's going to make me feel better. Like, for example, and my wife has never done this, but if she said, I really need you to learn how to do this thing over here and just start doing that as part of your daily routine, if it was something that didn't interest me or that I got no joy out of, I would just turn around and say, that's not going to serve me well. So, and then in the long term, that's not going to serve us well. So why would I do it? So yeah, I guess I pursue what makes me feel good without being, what is the word for that when you're taking that too far?
Obsessed?
No, not even obsessed. I can't think of the word. I'm terrible at this. Hedonistic, without being hedonistic. So I'm not pursuing pleasure to a hedonistic level, but I think as long as like something's making you feel positive about yourself and about your life, then pursue it and put the time into it. And if it's detrimental to that, you probably don't need to mess with it.
Just for the podcast, you mentioned that you recently discovered that you were diagnosed with ADHD and you're divergent.
Yep.
To what extent has that impacted your life, and did that change things when you, I guess, first sort of realized that they had ADHD?
Yeah, so it was something that I joked about a lot over the years. I would just say to people like, "Oh, I've got 20 hobbies because I'm ADHD," or sorry, you lost me mid-conversation there because I'm hyperactive and I feel like doing a backflip instead of listening to you, which is quite rude. I'm sorry, everyone that has ever experienced that with me. And so I thought, eventually, again, it comes with this process of growing older and just being sensible. I was like, I need to speak to someone properly about this and see if it really is a thing, because I feel like it is. And I'd watched a whole lot of information about it online, and I could really identify with everything that I was hearing from people that are considered neurodivergent. And along with being ADHD, I thought I probably had a lot of autistic traits that were ignored as a youth that probably should have been looked into. But like, having said that, I don't know what would have happened if it was looked into then anyway. So it's good to like have it like out in the open and just as a known factual thing. Like, yeah, you really are ADHD. And whilst I'm not considered autistic because I didn't score high enough on the spectrum, I had enough autistic traits to be considered on the spectrum. You had to get a score of 39 or something on this chart, and I got 27 or something. So like, yeah, I didn't need it to tell me for me to know, but it was nice to be told by a professional and I guess have it on record and then have it confirmed instead of just joking about it. I can actually say like, I really identify with this thing because I am. Yeah. But I definitely don't think, in the context of these things being disabilities, I don't think that anyone should identify as their disability. You don't walk around saying I'm this and so I can't do this. Like for me, it's a superpower. I'm ADHD, and so I have 20 things that I'm passionate about. And whenever I learn about something new that I'm slightly interested in, I'll just become like really fascinated and obsessed. And it just becomes something else that I like learn to love and learn inside out. And then when I speak to other people about it, I speak about it with zest, and it gets them excited about something that maybe they never knew about before. And you just like grow your skill set and grow as a person because of it. So I don't really see it as a negative. The only time it's a negative is what I mentioned before. Sometimes when I'll be engaged in conversation, I do find it hard to pay attention if I'm not completely engaged with the topic at hand. If someone's whinging to me about something negative, I don't really care because I don't have time for the negativity. I don't know if that's an ADHD trait or if that's just a personal development thing, but like I'll just switch off, and in my head, I'll be like, what was I going to work on at the gym later? And then I'm looking at them nodding, but I'm just like, I don't even know what they're saying anymore. They're not even talking about the negative thing anymore. They're talking about something super relevant, but I switched off. So that's where it's detrimental for me, in that I can switch off when sometimes it matters. But otherwise, I don't see it as a negative. It's great.
I love that. It's saying that using it as your superpower, that's a huge mindset shift that I think you can apply to almost anyone that has some sort of, doesn't have to be like a disability, but just something that affects them, that makes them super focused or like passionate about something, and they can use that to their advantage to really improve that aspect of life. And even transferring that as a way, even if it's like discipline, if you're really disciplined at something, that could be transferred to so many things in life. And so, yeah, I love that you've making that your superpower. One of your other projects is your brand, Calitrix. Tell me what this brand is, and is there a vision for it? Where do you see this going?
Yep. So Calitrix was initially, I was going to teach classes in calisthenics and tricking, and I just needed a name for the school. And my wife said, "What about Calitrix? It combines calisthenics and tricks." And I didn't need any other suggestions. I was like, "That is so cool. That's so perfect. Let's call it Calitrix." And so I briefly ran classes and didn't bring enough clients in to have it as a full-time thing at the time, because I didn't know much about how to structure or start a business. And I was trying to be like 20 roles all at once, and it didn't work for me. And it kind of just went by the wayside, and I went back to security work for a while. But in the back of my mind, I was like, Calitrix could be something. I need to do more with this. So I kind of just restructured and changed it so that I'm teaching online via tutorials as a free service now. So I just want to contribute and give something so that people are getting more into these niche sports. And then alongside that, to help fund it, I've started an apparel brand, but I do want to grow the brand into an overall fitness brand. So in the same way that Nike and Adidas, and it's big aspirations, but I don't see the point in aiming small. Shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon, and that's pretty decent too, you know? So so in the next 12 to 24 months, I'll be selling fitness equipment alongside the apparel, but the apparel I've made sure is really high quality. It is like of the highest quality garments. I want it so that when somebody picks up one of my pieces, that they're like, I love this, not just because it's my friend's brand or because I saw this guy on YouTube. It actually like feels really nice to wear. It looks cool. Just like when you grab a piece of those, you know, more expensive brands. And so at the moment, I'm just focusing on getting everything as peak quality as possible, even if I don't want it to be cheap. And so that is hard starting out as a business. It's easy to sell cheap stuff, you know, once. Nobody's coming back a second time to buy something cheap and crappy. But I want my customers to really love the brand and grow with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think especially apparel is hard to really get yourself started, especially living in Sydney and trying to establish a name for yourself. Apparel can be quite a hard business to really take off.
Yeah.
Have you always been entrepreneurial? Like obviously you can tell that you love starting new projects and stuff.
I think I have, and just didn't acknowledge it again in my younger years. I just didn't have a lot of acknowledgement of my like strengths and what I really wanted to pursue. So, you know, like when I was making beats when I was young, I was always trying to sell my work or trying to find artists that I could go into like business partnerships with. And I sold my services as a sound engineer, but I could have done with a manager and a receptionist, and trying to do everything all on your own when you're not educated on finance and generating wealth and managing people and things in general is a struggle. So like I wish that I knew those things when I was younger. All I knew was the artistic side of making music. All I knew was like the guarding side of security. But as I've grown, I've learned like so much more about management and wealth generation and organization, and it's all coming together now. And yeah, I've just realized like I'm an entrepreneur because it's part of my personality. That's something that I want to pursue. So yeah, I'll keep doing that.
Yeah, of course. And is there anything that you have this sort of big goal or bucket list that you have yet to accomplish, or do you find at this point it's just trying to build Calitrix? And this can be just life in general, doesn't have to be business per se.
Yeah, so bucket list things. I want to fly one day, and I don't mean in an airplane. So I want to get like a jet suit. I don't know if you've seen those, or one of those like rocket packs. I was actually briefly enrolled at university in a physics and astrophysics degree in mechatronics engineering. And as my like university project, I wanted to basically build an Iron Man suit, and people laughed at me at the time. It's now a sport in Dubai. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's like
No, I haven't.
jetpack races. Like it's only just started happening, but it's a thing. So, and it's not those water propelled ones. They literally have jet turbines on their back and on their hands, and they fly and race with these things as a sport. No doubt it will also become a tool for the military. But yeah, one day I want to do that for fun. And the other thing I want to do, I mentioned, is I want to buy a cottage out in the middle of nowhere with a small little recording studio and just chill out with my wife into our older years, being surrounded by nature and animals, and maybe look after some Australian wildlife. Those are my bucket list. I love it. Things.
Awesome, man. To finish off with this podcast, I'm just going to finish with some rapid fire questions and then one final question to sort of end the podcast today. So firstly, best and worst exercises.
Oh, how do you mean best? Do you mean like what do I enjoy, or what am I best at?
I can let you be the judge of that.
Okay. When it comes to weights, I really enjoy bench pressing and deadlifting. Calisthenics, front lever, and muscle up. So they're the best. Worst, planche. I spent 3.5 consistent years trying to achieve planche and got the world's ugliest 3 to 5 seconds straddle hold, and then got hurt and lost 3.5 years of progress. And I've just now, like 12 or 18 months later, started resuming that again. So like, I will love planche if I ever get it as an 80 kilo 41-year-old, or probably 45 by the time I get it. But it's a pain point for me. Squatting, when it comes to weights, man, my squat has always been the weakest, but I think it's because I don't train legs enough, because I always want to be mobile and agile to still be flipping around. And because as you know, when you don't train legs like regularly, you get really sore in between, and it makes moving around hard. So my lack of training frequently enough at legs has made my squat my weakest point. The strongest I've ever pushed is 150 kilos at 84 kilos body weight, which is not amazing. And it was scary pushing 150 with no spotter for me. So squatting, I would say I hate until I start doing it with some regularity, and then I don't hate it as much. I don't like hating things. Yeah, I guess we'll just leave it at that. So planche and squats are the dislikes, and the other things I love.
Yep. Training in a gym or outdoors?
That's a hard one. Outdoors is like really nice because I love being out in the open in the sun and nature. And definitely when I'm tricking, I do not like a roof over my head, even if it's 30 meters above me in a gymnastics facility. I like being outdoors for tricking, but for the like weight training and calisthenics, probably gym environment.
Audiobooks or podcasts?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I think I get more enjoyment and engagement watching podcasts with people that are really knowledgeable on what they're talking about. But I do listen to audiobooks a lot too. They just can be, as you know, a bit mundane in the delivery. Sometimes when they're read out by a computer, especially.
Yeah. Tea or coffee?
Coffee. Too many coffees.
Yeah. Beach or mountains?
Whoa, is there a beach by the mountains? I'd like to live in the mountains, but I go to the beach regularly. I actually, out the backyard, like I can see the mountains, and the beach is 20 minutes away. So I'll say mountains.
Yeah. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise. There's something more
favorite
beautiful
book
about. Sorry?
Favorite book?
Favorite book. Oof. I don't, admittedly, haven't physically picked up a book to read in a while, but there's three. A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. As a kid, I loved that. And then when I was a bit older, I read 1984 by George Orwell. And I think that like every human should read that and then reflect on how the world is. And then the other one is this that I've been looking for the last few weeks. So it's Hermetic Philosophy from Hermes Trismegistus. I'm very much into esoteric teachings, and the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus are actually the root of where all religion and science stems from a very, very long time ago. I love that book.
Wow.
It's called the Kybalion.
I'm gonna have to go find that and read that. Final question: if you could go back to 20-year-old Shannon, what would be sort of one thing you've learned from your health and fitness journey that you would change?
I think just acknowledging early on that you're actually an athlete, dude. You're not just hyperactive, and you can really do good at something if you just like keep pursuing it and don't get distracted.
Fantastic. And where can people find you?
So if you're talking about socials all over the shop, my main focus is YouTube and my website. So the website's only new and it's still being built up, but that's at www.calitrix.com.au. And then on YouTube, I'm at Calitrix Fitness, but then I'm also on Facebook, Instagram. I very rarely post to TikTok. I think I'm on Threads, but it just like auto shares stuff off Insta. I don't interact with it. And I just joined Patreon because like, why wouldn't you if you're trying to be online and actually be actively generating an audience there? So again, I think that's at Calitrix. Generally, if you look up Calitrix on Insta, I'm Cali_Trix, but you'll find me. It's spelt like that. And I'm all over the place. But yeah, the focus is really YouTube. That's been my favorite platform to learn from. And I really want to grow on there too.
Fantastic. Well, all the socials will be listed into the show notes in the podcast, so whether it's on YouTube or in Spotify when it gets released. But thanks so much, Shannon. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I hope we get to do a part 2 one day because there's so many more questions that we could really dive in. And but yeah, thanks again so much, Shannon. Thanks so much for listening to the audience, for listening to the Midweek Motivation Podcast. And the episodes are going to be kind of uploaded randomly, so not really sure when the next one's going to be, but thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.